Most people believe they are thinking. They believe there's a clear me inside their head making decisions, analyzing life, planning the future. But if you actually watch closely, something strange appears. Thoughts are not being created by you. They're appearing on their own. The same fears, the same memories, the same predictions, over and over again, until repetition starts to feel like identity. And the most unsettling part is this. You were never taught to question the voice that never stops talking. Most people believe they are thinking. In reality, they're being thought. The same fears, the same memories, the same imagined conversations, the same predictions about the future, the same stories about themselves, repeated day after day, year after year, until repetition becomes identity. And because this process happens constantly, most people never notice it. A fish does not notice water, and a mind trapped inside thought rarely notices thought itself. From the moment you wake up in the morning, the machinery begins. Before your feet touch the floor, your mind is already moving. What do I need to do today? What if something goes wrong? What do people think about me? Am I behind in life? Will I ever reach my goals? The stream never ends. One thought becomes another. One memory triggers another. One fear creates 10 more. And before the day has even started, your attention has already been hijacked by a voice you never consciously chose. The strange part is that most people call this normal. They assume that because thoughts appear automatically, they must be important. But if every thought were important, your mind would be the wisest place on earth. Instead, most thoughts are repetitions, old patterns replaying themselves, ancient programs running in the background. The human brain evolved to solve problems. Thousands of years ago, this ability helped our ancestors survive. A rustle in the bushes could be a predator. A strange sound in the darkness could mean danger. Thinking was useful. Thinking kept people alive. But the modern world is different. The predators are mostly gone. The dangers are often imagined. Yet the machinery remains. The mind continues searching for threats even when none exist. And because it cannot find enough real problems, it begins creating psychological ones. A future disaster that has not happened. An argument that never occurred. A rejection that exists only in imagination. An embarrassment nobody remembers except you. The mind manufactures endless scenarios, and then it convinces you they matter. This is where overthinking begins. Not as intelligence, not as wisdom, but as unconscious attachment to mental activity. Many people are not addicted to social media. They are addicted to thinking. Social media simply provides new material for the addiction. Without realizing it, they spend years trapped inside mental loops. The same thoughts returning in different forms. The same emotions wearing different masks. The same internal prison with constantly changing decorations. Ancient philosophers noticed this long before neuroscience existed. They observed that human suffering was often created twice. First by reality, then by thought. A difficult event happens. Then the mind replays it 100 times. A mistake occurs. Then the mind relives it for years. The event may last minutes. The thinking can last decades. This is why two people can experience the same situation and suffer completely different amounts. One experiences the event. The other experiences the event plus 10,000 thoughts about the event. And those thoughts become their reality. Most people never question this process. They assume they're the voice in their head. They assume every thought belongs to them. But notice something subtle. You do not choose most of your thoughts. They arrive. They appear. They speak themselves. Then they leave. If you were truly the thinker of every thought, you would be able to predict each one before it arrives. But you cannot, because thinking is happening to you, not by you. This is where a deeper layer of understanding begins to emerge. Thought is not the self. Thought is an event inside consciousness. And consciousness is the space in which all of it happens. At first, this sounds abstract, but it becomes clear through direct observation. Close your eyes for a moment and simply watch. A thought appears, then another, then silence between them. Notice that even the silence is noticed. Something in you is aware of both noise and silence equally. That awareness is not trying. It is not struggling. It is simply present. Thought changes constantly. Awareness does not. Thought rises and falls like waves. Awareness remains like the ocean. And just like the ocean is not the wave, you are not the thought. This distinction changes everything. Because the moment you realize you can observe thought, you discover something extraordinary. You are not identical to the voice. You are the one hearing it. And if you can hear it, then it cannot be the entirety of who you are. For many people, this realization feels uncomfortable because they have spent their entire lives identifying with mental noise. Without it, they feel uncertain. Without it, they feel exposed. Without it, they feel like something is missing. But what is actually missing is not the self. It is just constant distraction. This is why silence feels strange at first. Not because silence is dangerous, but because silence removes the illusion of control. The mind, when left alone, reveals its own automatic nature. Sit alone in a room without stimulation. No phone, no music, no input, and observe what happens. The mind begins producing thoughts as if something is required. It reaches for meaning. It reaches for stimulation. It reaches for escape. Because it has been trained to believe that stillness is emptiness. But stillness is not emptiness. It is clarity without interference. The mind resists this because it mistakes movement for life. Yet life is not thought. Life is experience before interpretation. Before you name this moment, it already exists. Before you describe it, it is already complete. Thought arrives after the fact, like commentary on something already real. And yet most people live inside the commentary instead of the experience itself. They do not see life directly. They see thoughts about life. This creates a strange distance between reality and perception. A person can be walking through nature, but thinking about their problems. They are not in nature. They're in thought about nature. A person could be speaking to someone they love, but mentally rehearsing tomorrow. They are not in the conversation. They are in anticipation. A person can be resting, but mentally revisiting the past. They are not resting. They are remembering restlessly. Attention is constantly displaced. And wherever attention goes, life follows. Modern systems understand this deeply. Entire industries are built on capturing attention and redirecting it endlessly. Notifications, feeds, recommendations, updates. Each one is designed to pull awareness out of presence and into fragmentation. Not because there is a conspiracy, but because fragmented attention is profitable. A scattered mind consumes more. A restless mind returns more often. A distracted mind is easier to guide. And so attention becomes something externalized, something constantly pulled away from its source. But attention is not meant to be owned externally. It is meant to be directed internally. Because attention is life itself in motion. Where attention rests, experience becomes vivid. Where attention scatters, life becomes dull. This is why some moments feel fully alive, while others feel empty, even if nothing externally changes. The difference is not reality. The difference is presence. And presence is simply attention not divided against itself. The tragedy is not that people think. Thinking is necessary. Thinking builds, creates, solves. The tragedy is unconscious thinking. Thinking that happens without awareness. Thinking that runs itself. Thinking that controls attention instead of serving it. Because when thinking becomes automatic, it no longer serves life. It replaces life. At that point, the mind is no longer a tool. It becomes the environment you live inside. And you forget there is anything outside it. But there is always something outside it. There is awareness. And awareness is not something you create. It is what you already are before thought begins. You do not have to build it. You only have to notice it. And noticing is not effort. It is recognition. Recognition that you are already here. Before analysis. Before interpretation. before story. Just here. The more this is seen, the less thought dominates. Not because thought is destroyed, but because it is no longer mistaken for identity. Thought becomes background instead of authority, and something subtle begins to shift. The urgency of thinking decreases. The need to constantly interpret fades. Space opens between thoughts. In that space, something else becomes visible. Clarity that does not require effort. Understanding that does not need reasoning. Peace that is not manufactured. Not because thought has been eliminated, but because it is no longer central. Life begins to feel less like a problem to solve and more like something being directly experienced. The mind still functions, but it no longer occupies the throne. And when it steps down, something remarkable happens. The world becomes immediate again. Sound becomes richer. Vision becomes clearer. Time becomes less fragmented. Even ordinary moments begin to feel complete in themselves, because nothing is being added on top of them. No commentary, no distortion, no unnecessary story. Just what is. And what is does not need improvement in order to be real. It only needs to be seen without interference. This is not a philosophy to believe. It is a reality to notice. And it is always available. Not in the future. Not after improvement. Not after understanding everything. But now, before the next thought arises. And yet even this understanding can become another layer of thinking. Another concept to hold. Another idea to analyze. But understanding is not the point. Observation is, because the mind will always try to turn truth into something it can store. But what is real cannot be stored. It can only be noticed in real time. Notice this carefully. Even now, as these words are read, the mind is forming commentary, agreement, disagreement, comparison, memory, judgment, all happening automatically. And none of it is you. It is movement inside awareness. Now consider something deeper. If thoughts are automatic, then so are emotional reactions tied to those thoughts. A thought appears, something is wrong, and immediately the body responds. Tension in the chest, pressure in the stomach, slight acceleration in breathing. But nothing outside has changed. Only thought has moved. This reveals something important. Most emotional suffering is not caused by events themselves. It is caused by interpretation of events in real time. An interpretation is almost always instant and unconscious. This is why people can feel anxiety without any clear reason. The mind has already created a scenario, and the body is reacting to it as if it is real. A simulation triggering a biological response, and the body does not know the difference. But awareness can know the difference. Awareness can see. This is a thought. This is a sensation. This is a reaction happening by itself. And in that recognition, something subtle begins to loosen. Not because the thought disappears, but because identification weakens. The thought is still there, but it is no longer believed as reality itself. This is the beginning of freedom, not the absence of thinking, but the absence of unquestioned believing. Because belief is what gives thought weight. Without belief, thoughts are just passing signals, like clouds crossing the sky without ownership. And yet most people unconsciously sign every thought like a contract. If the thought says, I am not enough, it is accepted. If the thought says something will go wrong, it is accepted. If the thought says this means something about me, it is accepted. But thoughts are not verdicts. They are events. And events do not define identity. Identity itself is another structure built from repetition. A collection of remembered thoughts reinforced over time. I am this kind of person. I always react like this. I can't do that. I am like this. Each one is a conclusion formed from past mental activity. But notice something crucial. A conclusion is not a fact. It is a frozen thought. And frozen thoughts create a frozen sense of self. This is why people feel stuck. Not because they are stuck, but because their identity is built from static interpretations of dynamic experience. Life moves, but identity resists movement. Life changes, but thought wants continuity. And so conflict arises internally. A part of you wants to grow, and another part insists on remaining consistent with the past. This creates invisible tension that most people never name. They call it stress. They call it confusion. They call it overthinking. But at its core, it is resistance to presence. Because presence has no fixed identity. It is always new, always unfolding, always now. And the mind does not trust what is always changing. It trusts what it can repeat. This is why it clings to memory, and why it projects endlessly into the future. Memory gives it identity. Future gives it control. But neither exists in reality, only in thought. And while thought moves between past and future, life remains here, unmoving, uninterrupted, already complete in each moment. Another subtle trap arises here. The mind begins to turn this understanding into a goal. I need to be more present. I need to stop thinking. I need to fix my mind. But notice the contradiction. The attempt to escape thinking is itself another form of thinking. The desire to become free becomes another chain. This is why effort often fails. Because effort reinforces the sense that something is missing. But nothing is missing. Only attention is misplaced. And attention does not need to be forced back. It only needs to be noticed. Where is it now? What is it attached to? What is it following? Without judgment, simply observing. And in observation, something naturally relaxes. Because what is seen clearly cannot dominate unconsciously. This is not control. It is clarity. And clarity reduces compulsion automatically. Consider again the nature of attention. It is constantly moving. From sound to thought. From image to memory. From sensation to imagination. But it always moves into something. Never nowhere. And wherever it goes, experience takes shape. This means attention is not just passive awareness. It is creative force. It constructs the lived world moment by moment. Not externally, but experientially, which is why two people can sit in the same room and inhabit completely different realities. One is present. The other is lost in thought. Same environment, different worlds. The difference is not external. It is where attention is anchored. And most people have never been taught to notice this anchor. So attention moves freely, but unconsciously. Pulled by habit, pulled by fear, pulled by stimulation, pulled by memory, until it feels like life is happening to them rather than through them. But this is not destiny. It is simply unobserved mechanics. And what is unobserved tends to feel like fate. The moment it is observed, it becomes structure. And structure can be understood. And what is understood no longer feels like mystery or threat. It becomes transparent, not necessarily controlled, but no longer overwhelming. And in that transparency, something very simple becomes available. Choice. Not choice over every thought, but choice over identification with thought. A space opens between impulse and response. And in that space, freedom exists, even if only for a second at first. That second is enough, because it shows that you're not fully inside the mechanism. You're also outside it, observing it. And anything that can be observed cannot be the observer itself. So the question returns again, quietly. What is it that notices all of this? Not as an answer to grasp, but as a direction of attention. Because the answer is not conceptual, it is experiential. And the more it is noticed, the less convincing the inner noise becomes. Not because it disappears completely, but because it loses authority. And when thought loses authority, life stops being filtered through distortion. It becomes immediate again. Simple, direct, unedited. Just this. And in that simplicity, something that was always present becomes obvious again. You were never actually inside the noise. You were always the space in which it appeared, and the space was never disturbed. Only attention was. And attention, once seen clearly, begins to return home on its own.